with a lot on my mind.
Hello and welcome to the video. This was about 6 bands and solo artists who were totally weird in various ways. Some were hugely weird, others were just nicely weird. And we'll start off with one of the former, or the latter rather, which is Deaf School. Now, Deaf School were formed in 1973 in Liverpool Art School, or Liverpool School of Art as it was called. The Deaf School name came from the fact that they were rehearsing in a hall which was originally the Deaf School, which had been taken over by the Liverpool School of Art, and it was formed by students and staff originally to play at the 1973 Christmas Ball. Because it was 1973, there was no requirement to play an instrument or anything like that, and anybody could join. And at one stage, there were 13 people on stage. But over time, they got their act together, literally. They got their act together so well that they entered the Melody Maker Folk and Rock, I think it was called, competition for bands, and they won. And that, catapulted them into the spotlight. And a guy called Derek Taylor, who was A&R man for Warner Brothers Records, but more importantly, he used to be the Beatles' publicist and a friend of Paul McCartney and John Lennon, George Harrison, etc., not to mention Ringo Starr, and apparently they signed with him because of the Beatles connection. I think they did 3 albums, they broke up in 1988. They never got huge success, but they were just totally outside the ordinary. Being art students, they were anything went, basically, and they all had weird names, and I can't remember exactly what happened. When they broke up in 1988, various members went off to do things. One of them formed the Liverpool independent record label Pro Plus, which did Half Man, Half Biscuit, and Jegsy Dodds and the Sons of Harry Cross, amongst others. Clive Langer, who was the guitarist, and he went off to produce Madness, Morrissey, Dexys Midnight Runners, and David Bowie, amongst others. Lead singer Betty Bright had her own band, The Illuminations, and she married Suggs, the lead singer of Madness. They reformed in 1988 for a bit, and I remember them reforming in 2006 because I put them on at the 100 Club. Place out. Personally, I am not a huge fan of the band.
It's too good for you.
See, it's all very clever. It's like a cross between Brechtian cabaret, Roxy Music, and the Carry On films. That's the way I would describe it. They have costume changes. They do all sorts of weird things on stage. It's not just a band turning up and playing songs. It's all sorts of things. They're very good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I always enjoyed watching them, but I wouldn't rush out to see them again or play their albums all the time. I play them occasionally and I enjoy what I hear, but Paul Denoyer, who was the founder of Mojo, amongst other things, a well-respected journalist, he basically said Liverpool produced 2 great bands, the Beatles and Deaf School. Now that's some praise. Now the second band we're going to talk about is Stump. Now, Stump were a band I only put on occasionally back in the mid-1980s. They were formed by Mick Lynch, who was a very eccentric sort of, it was like a cross between Captain Beefheart and the indie scene that was happening at the time. I thought they were absolutely great. There's a guy playing with them called Nick Hobbs, who I got to know better later, who was sacked for being too serious. So that's the sort of thing we're talking about here. Nick Hobbs went on to be in a band called the Shrubs.
I remember nothing that I memorized.
Who played a lot more at the Cricketers because basically their agent, Mike, was very keen to get them, because apparently I was the only person who would ever put them on. They were Ronnie the barman, who was not your typical pub rock barman, because he was from Liverpool. He was a lot older than us. He was probably mid-40s. He used to absolutely hate the Shrubs, and he used to insist I only put them on his nights off. So there you go. And Nick Hobbs went off to, I think he booked the main stage at Glastonbury for a while, and I'm pretty sure that it was Nick Hobbs who booked the Len Bright combo off me to play on the main stage at Glastonbury, whenever that was. So it all paid off in the end, did it not? But going back to Stump, everything sounded a bit weird. I mean, they had songs about elephants on the M1 and Charlton Heston's vest and things like that.
That Charlton Heston put his vest on.
Mick Lynch put everything into it. They were like amazing, I thought. I mean, totally amazing. But they never really got there. John Peel liked them, of course, needless to say. And that was about it, really. Somebody said, and it might have been me, I can't remember, said it was like Captain Beefheart locked in a biscuit tin. That's the sound, you see, with the Gang of Four. I hope it was me who actually said that, because it's quite clever.
You are a genius.
At this point, can I just say, if you're not already subscribed, etc., it's really good for everybody, especially little children who need your help if you subscribe. And also, let's not forget, if you like this video, please like it and share it with your friends, and indeed anybody. I'm not fussy. And let's move on to the next band. And who's that then? It is the unfortunately named Shaggs.
We do our best, we try to please, but we're like the rest. We're never.
Now, the Shaggs are an American band, very strangely, and they might have heard them because Frank Zappa really enjoyed them apparently, and he played them a lot when he was on radio and stuff like that, and other people have been too. They're also named after bands, not after the British version of what shag means, and if you don't know what that is, if you're an American or whatever, then please Google it and don't blame me.
No one's ever going to shag you if you cry all the time.
I thought instantly of the big seabird called the shag, but it's not that either. It's the dance craze of the time. They were formed in 1965 by a New Hampshire blue-collar worker. I think he worked in a factory called Austin Wiggin, who had 3 daughters. Apparently, he founded them because his mother, I think it was, read his fortune and said he was going to marry a strawberry blonde, have 3 sons, was it, or 2 sons, whatever, have some sons anyway, and then he'd have 3 daughters who would become a pop sensation. And he did marry a strawberry blonde, and he had the boys, and then he had these 3 girls. So against their wishes apparently, because they had no interest in music whatsoever, he made them form a band. They had no musical talent whatsoever. This is 1967, don't forget. This is before punk and all sorts of things. So it was really the first punk band, I suppose you could say. If you're not going to talk about, anyway, we won't talk about that. Let's say they're the first punk band, it's good. And they played at the local hall every week, apparently Friday night. I think he borrowed $1,000 or something and took them into a local studio where he basically said, you know, record them. And they had, by this stage, they had, I think, 12 songs, and they recorded them in one day, which anybody that knows about recording, even back then, that's a bit rushed. The guy who owned the studio and the engineer were given more money to make it sound good, to remix it, and so they got in session players, and the session players genuinely couldn't keep up with the strange rhythms that they were playing with and just couldn't improve it.
My pal's name is Football, he always likes to roam. My pal's name is Football.
I believe it was mostly the original recording by the 4 girls, because there were 3 girls who were in the band, and then I think Rachel is the one who came in later on occasionally. But the core of the band was actually 3, led by this Dot. And so this, apparently, the guy who ran the studio then got more money off Austin to get some pressed, and apparently Austin paid for 1,000 copies. But there's a rumour or legend now that he only got a few pressed up, and so they're reasonably rare. Austin died, and the band just broke up, obviously, because the girls decided they're not going to do it without their father insisting. So that was the end of them. But later on, they got picked up, as I say. Frank Zappa played a couple of their tracks on the radio. Kurt Cobain, I think, named that their album as one of his like top 5 favourite albums of all time. And it sort of like got a, I don't know, I mean, I've played it since several times. I played it since when I first heard it, because I think Mark Lamar played it on his Radio London programme, which was probably, I don't know, 20 years ago or something. So I first heard it then and I wasn't that impressed. And I've heard it since. Believe it or not, I do a bit of research for this. So I did play, I must be honest with you, not all of it again, because it's not really for me. It's very much you could, I don't know, there's a vibe to it, but the vibe you get is not of people enjoying themselves. It's a vibe of, you know, let's just get this over with as fast as we can. That's what I think. But anyway, other people have different variations. Whether people like it because it's like so bad or so good, who knows? But whatever happened, Dot went on. She eventually came back and tried to have a solo career apparently, but that ended in failure too. But it's all very weird, and that's the Shaggs, if you pardon the expression.
No shagging up there.
And who's next then? Who is next? Well, the next one is Charlie Feathers.
If you love, I give you all. They don't ever.
Charlie Feathers is I don't know, even to rockabilly people, he's quite obscure. I heard of him because when I was at Time Out, there was a series, an American collector series or something, where they got like, I don't know, cult figures. I remember there was one by Johnny Johnson, who was Chuck Berry's piano player, which was very good. There's a track on it called Tanqueray, which I still play now, actually. It's on a couple of mixtapes, which I've say mixtapes, they're on my phone. So would you call that a mixtape? Well, I do, because I'm quite old. In fact, I was 71 only 2 days ago. So you wouldn't believe it, would you? No, people say to me, you don't look 71, Jim. 81, yes, but not 71. But anyway, I digress. We're going back to Charlie Feathers, and he had I think it's called American Explorers. Jimmy Dale Gilmore was another one, and so was the American rockabilly guy called Charlie Feathers. He was born in Holly Springs in Mississippi, which is on the border with Tennessee. So it's like a real plantation town. So he used to use the N-word even when he's been interviewed. There's a famous interview where he actually uses the N-word and then sort of like stops halfway through and explains himself.
Blues stuff. I might demonstrate a little of it here, if I will. I used to up and down Mississippi, I'd see these colored people, you know.
But it's like Jerry Lee Lewis as well, especially when he was with his people. Although Chuck Berry, I believe, and he were like sort of friends, so who knows? People are very complicated, aren't they? I think his heart was in the right place because he was a big fan of the blues, and he could play blues guitar, and he did play with several obscure American blues players who were all black.
The blues stuff, I would say they would chop this guitar, they'd get... You're that one black red. Someday I'll find your trail. Yeah, you that one black red. Someday I'll find your trail.
Charlie Feathers was a friend of Junior Kimbrough, and his epitaph, he was the beginning and end of all that music, he said, is written on Junior Kimbrough's gravestone. He was born in 1932. It's a different world. I suppose when he was growing up, it was late 1940s, early 1950s, and things were very different then, especially in Mississippi. And he basically went to Memphis. He went to work in the studio of Sam Phillips that became Sun Studio. And apparently he was playing any instrument he could get his hands on just to do sessions. And the sort of implication is he didn't get paid for it and things, to start with at least. He just helped Sam Phillips out. I don't know whether he's like totally truthfully everything he says, but well, he claims that he was the one who found Elvis Presley for Sam Phillips, that he's found him first, and that he suggested he go to the Sun Studios, and he also suggested that he arranged a couple of Elvis Presley tracks, including the first one he ever did, That's All Right Mama and The Blue Moon of Kentucky. And that's possible, because like I spoke to Steve Cropper, worked at the Stax studio in Memphis, and apparently everybody just it's like that was a thing back then. Everybody just like mucked in and did what they could. So it's quite possible that Charlie Feathers did what he said. Charlie Feathers is a very good guitar player, but Sam Phillips didn't like his voice, and I think his voice is his thing. He had a very strange way of singing.
Like a big fat man, I've been sitting in the sand trying to figure out a way to make you understand.
So Charlie Feathers remained obscure practically all his life. As a person, he was like, I don't know, he was such a weird guy because he was into UFOs and in conspiracy theories. And he would, like, on stage, he would go on for 2 or 3 minutes on some tangent about something, and he'd be very forceful. And he dressed in rhinestones. He was very outgoing, I suppose you'd say. And I don't know, he just like one of the eccentrics of rock and roll, and that's Charlie Feathers.
All right, let's move on to riding a pony into the Grand Canyon.
And the next one you probably will have heard of, which is Lee Scratch Perry.
I make reggae, spiritual reggae, holy reggae, godly reggae. I will not accept ragamuffin reggae. And anything that the devil is insisting in, I am here to cramp and paralyze it and cripple it. I'm here to destroy the devil's brain, but the devil can't reign.
He was like a reggae superstar, really. He was one of the original pioneers of the sound systems back in Jamaica, back in the day. Lee Perry worked with Cox and Dodd's sound system from the early days, and then fell out with him and moved to work with Joe Gibbs. He recorded and produced all sorts of artists during this time, and then he fell out with Joe Gibbs and formed his own Upsetter Records. And the first major hit he had was a song called People Funny Boy. Which was directed towards Joe Gibbs and unusually featured a sampled baby crying, and the reggae beat is the first instance, many say, of the reggae beat in history. So there you go.
This man is one of Jamaica's foremost record producers. He has produced such artists as Junior Marvin, The Meditation, The Upsetters, to name a few. He's not only a record producer, he's a songwriter, a poet, a musician, a video expert, and overall a Rasta man. The man I'm talking about is none other than Lee Scratch Perry, better known in Jamaica as the Upsetter.
And he built his own studio, the Black Ark studio, which eventually burnt down. Because the thing about Lee Scratch Perry is, he was, I don't know whether it was a mental health thing or whether he was into psychedelia, whether he was totally drugged up. I don't know, maybe just the way he was. I don't know. I don't want to cast aspersions, because I met him 2 or 3 times and he was always very pleasant. Bit strange occasionally. Like, I remember I saw him at Dingwall's once. I was there to see Boss Goodman, who was the guy that booked Dingwall's, and Lee Scratch Perry was playing there that night, and I was partly arranged to be there so I could watch the show afterwards, but he had to go around the whole building. He was going around, I don't know, holy water or something on them, trying to bless them, because apparently he said that the evil spirits could get in and mess up the show through the light sockets and things like that. And once I remember when he was recording, and he recorded everybody from Bob Marley to The Clash, by the way. When he was recording in his studio, he would bury microphones in the ground for extra reverb and things like that. So he was a pioneer of all that. And I got so many, I mean, he was so prolific. I mean, he would just, I don't know whether we would record, if he could, I think he would have recorded himself 24/7. But it's so prolific. And I know when I had a big CD collection, I basically had a whole shelf that was just Lee Scratch Perry. And to be honest with you, on every one of them, there'd be at least one track that I would think was absolutely marvellous, and probably 5 or 6 that I just could not listen to at all. Or whether that was Skinny Seat, this is not to say anything about him and his genius, this is just to say about me and my ear, so don't take that as a criticism, please.
Getting ready.
Again, I don't know who said this, but if God took mushrooms and built a studio, he'd call Lee Scratch Perry for help. So there you go. That's Lee Scratch Perry. And who are we going to talk about next?
Last but certainly not least.
Well, it's got to be Screaming Lord Sutch, hasn't it?
Wherever you are! Good night! Wherever you are!
Now, I've mentioned Screaming Lord Sutch. I've done a whole video about him. There's a link up there somewhere. So if you haven't seen that, it might be a good idea for you to watch it. I won't talk about his life as so much here. I'll talk about my time that I knew him. And I knew David Sutch as I knew him. I first put him on at Cambridge Corn Exchange. This was probably 1973, something like that. And after that, I went to see him. He lived at the time just off Portobello Road in this very nice flat. And I'd go down to see him occasionally. And he wouldn't drink, that's the thing. David wouldn't drink. I think he had problems with that. I think it made him depressed, and he did have mental health things, and eventually he killed himself, though I generally can't believe he did, because I don't know, it's just one of those things. I don't know, it's just one of those things. Perhaps he did, but I don't know. I just can't picture him hanging himself in his mother's house, because his mother just died. He was very close to his mother. She lived in Hounslow. When I was doing the Cricketers, he basically played there, I don't know, every, 6 months or something, and it was a special event. Every time would be totally different. I remember more than once, he brought Cynthia Payne, who was like in the newspapers at the time, because she was a madam who ran a call girl racket, and famous people had turned up. This is years ago now, I can't remember all the details. And so he would turn up with Cynthia Payne to the Cricketers, and she wasn't actually on stage, she'd just be part of the audience, and he'd talk to her on stage and stuff, and she'd reply. So when Lloyd's Bank opened up the Joe Meek studio in his flat in Holloway Road, obviously David Sutch was one of Joe Meek's proteges, sort of thing, and he recorded that. And he was he basically informed me about it, and I went there, and he basically showed me around the old studio and what they did where, and all sorts of things, and where Joe Meek did this, and where Joe Meek rested his shotgun and stuff like that. And also he told me lots of stories, which are all in the video, so search for it if you want to watch it. I think you'll find it interesting. These are two videos. People reckon that my Joe Meek and my Screaming Lord Sutch videos are the best I've done. So, I don't know. You tell me. Screaming Lord Sutch was a total phenomenon. There wasn't a single person in the UK who didn't know who Screaming Lord Sutch was. Not only was he a musical guy, he basically formed a rock and roll horror story on stage. He did a song called Jack the Ripper, which may be in bad taste now, but at the time, don't forget all the Hammer horror films around and things, and he did this as a musical thing, and he did it live on stage. And basically, he one time had the longest hair in Britain, apparently, and he became one of the most famous people in Britain. He was just a self-publicist, but the alternate side of David, because I knew him quite well, was he was very shy. Which you wouldn't think, would you? For somebody who was constantly seeking, recognition and putting himself out there, he stood, I think, in every by-election, between, I don't know, whenever it was he started and when he died. And he formed his own political party, the Monster Raving Loony Party. And apparently a lot of the stuff which was in his early manifestos, which everybody thought was totally weird, has since been picked up and made law. So who's the fool? Anyway, he was a very nice guy. He wasn't a fantastic singer, actually, to be fair. He was more of a shouter, but he had tremendous ideas. He had very strong stage presence. Everybody liked him, and he was a total legend. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, as I say, like, follow, subscribe, share it with your friends, and I'll see you next time. You should watch this one next. Goodbye.